Hello Matrix. Today we are going to be having a look at the poem This Winter Coming by Karin Press. Karin Press wrote this poem in 1986, and this was the year in which the white political leaders imposed a nationwide state of emergency to stop the 10th anniversary commemorations of the Soweto uprisings of 1976. And during the state of emergency, the state police arrested and detained people without any charge. And this, of course, created widespread violence in the country, leading to many black political activists actually going into exile. During this time, there were daily protests, leading to many lives lost, and the army and the police had the power to use any kind of force as they arrested the protesters. So Karin Press's poem reflects on the social, political, and economic oppression of people during apartheid, and reveals the hardships faced by the people during the state of emergency. The poem deals with many themes such as suffering, oppression, exploitation, and deprivation, but it also looks at resistance and hope. This is what we would call a protest poem, and the poet breaks the usual writing convention mainly by a lack of capital letters and the use of minimal punctuation. And this is what we would call stream of consciousness writing. It illustrates the way the speaker is thinking. There is also no rhyme scheme, and all 5 stanzas differ in length. There is a lot of enjambment throughout the poem, and the lines run into each other, which mimics how our thoughts run into each other. And you'll also notice that there is the use of rhetorical questions at the end of each stanza, and this is, of course, to force the reader to interact with the poem's subject matter. Here is a reminder of the color key that I like to use when annotating poems. So if you would like to take note of it, we've got diction in pink, imagery in green, structure in red, tone in orange, and mood in purple. In stanza 1, the speaker says, "Walking in the thick rain of this winter we have only just entered. Who is not frightened?" The first word of the stanza, walking, has connotations of vulnerability. We get the sense that there is no protection from the elements. And the description of the rain being thick tells us that this is very heavy rain. It is oppressive, and it indicates harsh times ahead because of the state of emergency. So already we could say that the mood of the stanza is foreboding and gloomy. We have a sense of impending danger. Now the writer speaks about this winter. So this is a specific winter, and we have only just entered it. So this is only the beginning. Things will get worse before they will get better. And here we have our first rhetorical question, which is, who is not frightened? And this rhetorical question emphasizes the fact that these are frightening times. So we can definitely say that the tone of the stanza is rather ominous. In stanza 2, we have the lines, "The sea is swollen, churning in broken waves around the rocks. The sand is sinking away, the seagulls will not land. Under the sky, the shroud falling, who is not frightened?" So in stanza 2, we have a shift from land to sea. There is further impending danger, and it's as though no place is safe. The land is not safe, the sea is not safe. And in fact, we can tell that the sense of danger just by the words being used to describe the sea. The sea is swollen, churning, and the waves are broken. So swollen has connotations of hurt and violence. Churning is to move roughly, so the sea is very dangerous. And again, the waves are broken, so this is a rough and stormy sea. This sense of danger is further emphasized by the description of the rocks. If we think about rocks, we think about something that is sharp and dangerous. It is the opposite of gentle. And then the next line we have, "The sand is sinking away." So again, the writer is trying to tell us that the land is not safe to stand on. It's unstable. And not even the seagulls will land. Not even they think it's safe. They sense the danger. It's as though nature is in complete turmoil. Once again, we could say that the mood of the stanza is ominous, just based on these descriptions. And I want to draw your attention to the word shroud over here. So a shroud is usually a cloth used to cover dead bodies. but this word is definitely hinting at the oppression and restriction experienced by people during apartheid. And its very word intensifies this feeling of fear, danger, and helplessness. And once again, we have the repetition of who is not frightened, which emphasizes that this fear is felt by everyone. In stanza 2, there is a shift from the natural elements. So in stanza 1 and 2, we had the land and the sea, but now we focus on the people, the actual subjects of the poem. And the misery of the people, mainly women and children in this stanza, is made explicit. And the writer says, in every part of the city, sad women climbing buses, dogs barking in the street, and the children in every doorway crying. You will notice there is the repetition of the word every over there. So suffering and fear is pervasive at this time. And she speaks about the sad women climbing buses. So these are women who work in the city for white people, and they are climbing buses because the Group Areas Act has segregated people, and people of colour are now forced to travel far distances to get to their workplaces. And the children are described as crying. So once again, we get a huge sense of fear and suffering at this time. And we can say that the tone of these first few lines is somber and solemn. And then the next few lines, she says, the world is so hungry. Madam's house is clean and the women return with slow steps. So the world is so hungry is what we'd call a hyperbole. It is an over-exaggeration. But what the poet is trying to say is that people suffer from poverty, but also suffer as a result of being deprived of human rights. And therefore the suffering is so huge that it is as though the entire world is suffering. And Madam's house is clean, so people of colour are forced to take care of white families rather than their own. And they have to suffer while the privileged do not. The line, women return with slow steps. Slow steps is an example of alliteration, which highlights once again how exhausted and disillusioned these women are. And they return home to their children, the street and the sky is tolling like a black bell. Now, I'm sure some of you will remember the poem Shipwreck, which is another one of your metric poems. And in that poem, there is the mention of a bell ringing and a bell tolling. So perhaps you're already familiar with the idea of tolling and how it signifies a bell that is rung at a funeral to announce a death. So the simile over here is comparing the sounds of the storm to a bell tolling, and the sky is also described as being very dark, and this is supported by the description of the bell being black. And once again, we could definitely get a sense that there is impending danger. And these women are described as a tide of sadness. So you'll see how, I guess we could call it an extended metaphor with the original description of the ocean in stanza 2, and now we've got a tide of sadness. But once again, I guess we could link it to our hyperbole with the world is so hungry. We now have a tide of sadness, so sadness is also so great. And just as the sea can drown things, the exhaustion of these women is all-consuming. And once again, we have the line, who is not frightened? So this repetition not only creates a sense of urgency and panic, but it almost, I guess, encourages everyone to be frightened of a future uprising. People are not going to stand for this kind of suffering and disempowerment for much longer. They are going to fight against it. In stanza 4, our speaker now looks at the men as they stand on every corner like old stumps in the rain, tombstones engraved with open eyes. So we see the repetition of every. Stanza 3 included the same word, and it is once again emphasizing the extent of the suffering. And these men stand on every corner like old stumps in the rain. So we have a bit of a double metaphor over here if we have a look at the word old stumps, tombstones, and engraved. The men are standing on street corners, obviously waiting to be offered work. But they are like old stumps because they seem to be rooted in place and cut off. They are disempowered and they are oppressed. And in fact, they almost seem more dead than alive because the oppression they are experiencing is killing them. They are hopeless. These open eyes are not looking towards a brighter future, it seems. It feels like more suffering is coming their way. And our speaker once again highlights the social inequality that was very evident during apartheid, because passing these men are people in bright cars full of sated faces. So the wealthy drive past in their fancy cars and they are sated, they are more than satisfied. They appear well-fed, perhaps even overfed. And so the social disparity is very clear. And they pass them. So this repetition emphasizes how invisible the needs of people of color have become. The government and white people refuse to confront this visible reality of social inequality. And therefore, who is not frightened? Because we are about to see an uprising against this inequality, against this suffering. And who is going to lead this uprising and fight against this winter? Well, it's going to be the children. So stanza 5 begins with, "Into the rain the children are running, thin as the barest twigs, they kindle a fire to fight the winter." So these children are running, they confront the storm. The children's reaction is very different to the adults. They are active, alive, and hopeful. And I would like to once again draw your attention to another poem that we have studied, which is "The Child Shot Dead" by Soldiers at Younger. In that poem by Ingrid Jonker, we saw again that this younger generation is going to be the one who are going to fight for change, and it's the same in this poem. And these children are described as being thin as the barest twigs, so their poverty and suffering is very evident, but despite this, they fight the cold of winter, which is a metaphor for the oppressive regime. They may be bare, they may have nothing, but this does not stop them. They are raging, they have passion and determination. And the writer mentions dead children, so she is alluding to the student uprisings where many children sacrifice themselves to provide the fuel to fend off this winter and bring about change. But of course, she is just reminding us that they are willing to sacrifice no matter how little they have to support them. For these lines, we could say that there is a tone of defiance being used with the writer's mention of this uprising, of this reaction of the children who are active, alive, and hopeful. And in the last few lines of stanza 5, the writer turns once again to the image of the sky. And she says that the sky collapsing under centuries of rain. So the sky is symbolic of their oppression, which is now collapsing and ending because they are willing to fight. And the word centuries of rain refers to the pain and suffering that has been endured for a very long time, and people are no longer willing to accept that. They are now willing to fight for that change. And for the last two lines, we have the repetition of the words, "Who is not frightened of this winter?" But we have an addition coming upon us now. So this winter is imminent and frightening, but the children, the younger generation, are prepared to fight for change and an end to the oppression. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and you feel like you have a better understanding of this poem and feel more confident for your exams. I have included a screen capture of a past matric exam question on this winter coming. It will certainly be very useful for you to work through and see how listening to this video has helped you understand and engage with the context and the themes and all our images, and hopefully be able to answer these questions with ease. If you have any other questions, you are welcome to pop them in the little comment box at the bottom of this video, and I'll be happy to help. Happy studying.